Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the National Center for Rural Road Safety's June webinar entitled Filibusters, Snipers, and Verbal Jiu-Jitsu, How to Manage a Public Speaking Event. My name is Jamie Sullivan, and I'm the Director for the National Center for Rural Road Safety. Just a few webinar logistics. As always, the duration of today's webinar is only 1 hour. Closed captioning is available and has been sent out by email and will also be available in the chat. Recording for this webinar will be available on our website within the week, and that, as always, is ruralsafetycenter.org/webinar-archive. We are using the question and answer pod today, so if you do have any questions for Kevin, please feel free to put those in at any time you would like to. You don't need to wait until the end, and I will ask those to him when we do stop for questions. Additionally, if you have any technical difficulties, please go ahead and put those in there as well so that Dana and I can respond to those for you. We do have a handout available for download in the handout pod, so feel free to download that. At the end of today's webinar, there will be a survey coming out. As always, that's just some feedback for us on how you like the webinar and what additional topics you'd like to see us tackle for the rest of this year. And then certificates of completion and an application for the CEUs will be provided for this webinar. The CEUs and completion certificates for the webinars that were in April are coming out this week. Some of our staff has been out on vacation and they are working on those today. One other announcement for you all as well, Rural Road Safety Awareness Week, as most of you know, is coming up very soon. It will be held July 15th through the 19th. Our theme that we announced last month is Life Between the Lines, Preventing Rural Roadway Departures. So just a reminder that what is already available on our website is the proclamation example, if you're interested in putting together a proclamation, as well as the sneak peek webinar that was done in May, and that's available on our archive webinar. When I do pass this webinar over to Kevin, I will go ahead and put those links in the chat pod for you as well. But again, the rest of the graphics should be coming out within the next few weeks. So please keep an eye on your emails and on our website for all of that information. And if you have any questions, reach out to us at info@ruralsafetycenter.org. And now I am going to pass today's presentation over to our marketing manager, Kevin Elliott. And before I do that real quick, just want to thank one more time our co-sponsor for today's webinar, the NLTAPA Safety Work Group. And so, Kevin.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, work group. Thank you, attendees, for attending. Jamie, you're seeing my screen, hearing my voice?
Yes, I am.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. There is a balance between having a catchy title and one that's just too long and ridiculous. And I'll leave it up to you whether this title crossed that line or not. But this is a follow-up to the other two public speaking communication webinars we've done recently. And someone mentioned on the last webinar we did something along the lines of, hey, like, what do you do if somebody interrupts you a lot in the room? Or what do you do if they want to kind of take the spotlight and won't stop talking, or something like that? And luckily, I had already had a webinar just on that topic, and it's called Filibusters, Snipers, and Verbal Jiu-Jitsu. And that comes from a few pretty predictable types of folks that are going to be in the room when you do public speaking events. So I love teaching public speaking skills. I love teaching public speaking techniques. It's one of my favorite things ever because it is one of the most powerful, marketable, valuable, basic human skills you can have. And it really is important. But I have a lot, so I'm going to jump right in. We have 1 hour. We all know everybody's scared of public speaking. Everybody's nervous about it. It is one of the more nerve-wracking activities in human life. It ranks right up there when they do polls, right up there with death and spiders and heights for universal human fears. It's just like people are scared of this. And so one of the things I love to do and hope this webinar helps you with is to not get rid of the fear, because that doesn't happen, but equip you with tools and mindsets and techniques to manage that fear and improve your public speaking skills. Because the good thing about public speaking being a universally fearful activity for people is that if you can get just a little bit better than the average person, which doesn't take a lot, the bar is pretty low, you can really stand out. It's a pretty low bar for excellence, which is, hey, it's kind of nice. Okay. One of the big fears of speaking in public, of being in a room is, oh my goodness, it's all these strangers in the room. What if they say something mean to me? What if they interrupt me? What if they say something, ask a question I can't answer? What if they embarrass me? What if they take over the room with their talking? What do I do? And those fears hold a lot of people back, I think, from walking into rooms of strangers and doing your public speaking. So that's why we're here. Why are we here? I'm going to define three types, three feared audience member types for you. The most common, there are others, but in all my experience, these are the ones that people are most afraid of. These are the ones that if I see them, these are the ones. So the big three. I'm going to teach you what to do though. Define those folks for you, what their motivations are, what they need, and then give you really practical how-to tips on how to deal with these people if they come up in the room. And then a few myth busters about this whole thing, about public speaking, about filibusters and snipers and all those folks. Because there are a lot of myths and a lot of unfounded fears around public speaking that I really, really, really want to help you dismiss. So why should you listen to me on this? Who is this guy? I can't even see his face. I don't know who he is. What are his credentials? Why is he any kind of authority at all on this? Well, here, first of all, there's a gigantic picture of my face, as usual. If you've been on my webinars, start with a big picture of Kevin's head. I have an undergraduate degree in theology and philosophy. The reason that matters for this presentation is since I was 18 years old, I have been trained to make arguments and to deliver those arguments in front of people verbally. I just have always done this for almost 30, well, no, more than 30 years. I will be 50 years old this year. And I started in my freshman year of college learning how to do this kind of thing. I've just done it a long, long time. I then went on and got a master's degree in corporate and public communication and learned even more about how to be a communicator. And that's how I got the job that I have right now. I also taught college public speaking and persuasion techniques for a decade at the Florida State University in Panama City. And maybe most importantly, my most important credential is I worked in childcare for 10 years. I worked in an after-school center when I was in college in that theology and philosophy degree. I worked in an after-school center every day after my classes. And the reason that matters is that those of you who have ever worked childcare out there, you already know where I'm going, and you're nodding your head, is the dynamics in a childcare center are exactly the same as every group of adults you have to ever manage. If you work childcare, you know how to manage human beings because children are just more honest about who they are. Adults, we are exactly like kids. We just try to pretend we're not. So that's why you should listen to me about it. But also, I just do this a lot. I speak all over the country. I always have. I was in Denver last week doing one. You can also tell I don't buy clothes very often. I wear the same shirts all the time. JCPenney, by the way, if you love my fashion sense, JCPenney, I highly recommend. I think Stafford sells these shirts. I just go in every couple of years and buy one of every color. So mostly gray and blue. That's me. But let me introduce you to the people you are afraid of, the ones we are here to talk about, the ones we are here to help you with. I want to introduce you to your audience, the three audience types that we are going to talk about, define, and then help you preempt and deal with in any room of people you're in. Here they are. I call them the catalyst, the filibuster, and the sniper. These are the three that if you know they're there and you can recognize them pretty quickly, and you will, when I describe them to you, you will, and have those techniques, you will neutralize that room. That's where the mental jujitsu comes in, is that this is a very subtle kind of exercise like jujitsu. If you know what jujitsu is, it's just grappling and this position and counter position. And if you want to manage the room well, these are the 3 kinds of people you manage, and you're in good shape. So I want to go through each one of them one at a time and describe who they are, what they need. A catalyst, as you know, a catalyst is something you put into a chemical or a set of chemicals that causes a reaction. A catalyst causes a reaction in the room. So what they do, what a catalyst person does, is they are a natural leader in the room. You, as the public speaker, as the person up there in front of the room, are by definition the leader of the room. And in theory, you're the leader of the room. But if you've ever taught school or worked in childcare or done this kind of thing, you know, some people are just natural born leaders. Some folks walk in and they change the energy in the room, and everybody's paying attention to them, and everybody is looking for them to lead the room, whether they know it or not. And that leader doesn't mean they're mean, and it doesn't mean they're trying to take over the room. Some folks are just natural leaders. They have an ability. Some of them, though, like leading a room, and they like the attention, and they like it that people are looking to them for clues. So what they do is they lead the room, whether you like it or not. That they are going to be someone the rest of the attendees defer to. And what those people need, what the catalyst, what drives them, is attention. Again, not bad. This is not a bad motivation. This is who they are. And they are used to having attention, and they're used to being able to command attention. And that can be really good for you. I'm going to teach you how to make it good for you in a little while. It can be nerve-wracking for you, and it can be bad for you, because if this person decides to take over the room through his or her comments or body language or any other way, you can lose the room. The catalyst person is like a domino. They start that domino going, and what will happen is that those dominoes will start to fall their way, and it will change the dynamic of the room. That's what we call it, losing the room. Comics use this term. If the crowd starts checking their watch, they're not paying attention, you've lost the room. And with a catalyst person, they can take over your room really easily because they are a natural born leader. And if they know they know that's who the kind of person they are, and they decide they want to do that, that's the fear, right? So they move the attention away from you, the presenter, and they put it onto themselves. That's the catalyst. Number 2, the filibuster. And if you know this term from your government class in college, or if you follow politics, you know a filibuster is a technique where people get up and they simply talk so long that they run the clock out on a piece of legislation so it cannot be voted on. And so a filibuster, what do? They monopolize your time. These will be the people, they have a story to tell. Oh, that happened to me this one time. Let me tell everybody in the room about it. Or, oh, you know what? I have a question about that. And they don't really have a question about that. They mostly want to get up and talk about that. So there's a difference. We want questions. Put all your questions into the chat pod, please. But you know the difference. You know what I'm talking about. These are the people who deep in their heart, and again, not bad people, but deep in their heart, think they can do a better job than you. Kind of wish they were the one in front of the room so they could deliver their really deep, amazing, insightful thoughts to the room. So they monopolize your time. They'll stand up and they'll use the premise of asking a question or following up or telling a short story, and off they go. So what do these people need? What do they really need? Because you might think, oh, they need attention. They do. They like the attention, but it's not like the catalyst likes the attention for the attention, for that rush. The filibuster needs to be recognized as a smart person. The filibuster needs recognition. Filibuster needs to hear that he or she has a good point. that he or she is thoughtful and knows what they're talking about, and maybe an authority on this, maybe more of an authority than you, the speaker, are. That they need that recognition. And that's why they fill up the room with their words, is they will monopolize time so they can seek that recognition they need. That's the filibuster. So catalyst, filibuster, and sniper. This is the one you're really afraid of, isn't it? This is the one that what they do is they counter argue. You make a point and they raise their hand and they go, yeah, but did you think about this? Ha ha, I bet you haven't thought about that. And they sit in the back of the room. They're almost always in the back of the room. And they sling arrows at you like a sniper. They're back there waiting for a little moment of weakness. And then they pounce. Ha ha, yeah, but I read this study that said this, which is the opposite of what you just said. I'm saying that in a really nasty kind of tone. That isn't necessarily how how snipers are. They're not necessarily mean. These are people who think they are helping the room. They think they are they're adding real value by saying, oh no, you probably haven't thought about this. What these people need is validation. So a filibuster just needs to be recognized. Thank you. Hey, you said something really smart. A sniper needs to hear, you know what, you're right. That's a good point. That's a really good, and they need that validation of saying, I thought of something that you haven't. Those are the ones you're scared of. Those are the ones, if I were to poll the room, you're likely some version of those three people are the ones who are making you nervous, and the ones you're afraid are going to show up as one of these three, and they're going to call you out, or they're going to take control of the room and you won't be able to get it back, or they're going to say something you haven't thought of and you're going to be embarrassed and you're going to look incompetent. Here's the thing though, and I want to really drill this in. These are not bad people. They don't wake up, or most of them, I'm sure there's some meanies out there, but for the most part, these people don't wake up and go, haha, I'm going to embarrass the public speaker today. They don't, it's not like that. This is their personality type. And if you had conversations with them, just private conversations, they will behave this way also. It's who they are. In their way, they think they are helping you. In their way, they think they're contributing to the experience and the learning. So I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, these are terrible jerks and I have to figure out a way to put them in the corner somehow. You don't. No. These are your audience members, and we want to collaborate with them and bring them in. So what do? You get one or two or three of these folks in your room, in your public speaking thing, and I've had all three. I've had all three at the same time in rooms before. It doesn't happen a lot, but it's happened. And so let me tell you what to do. There are two phases of preparation, or sort of execution you can do, implementation of these tips I'm going to give you. There is before the room. There is work you can do and should do, always do, before you get into the room, before your public speaking event. There is a lot of work you need to do, you can do, and if you do this pre-work really well, a lot of the in the room stuff goes away. The other part is in the room. There are tactics, there are activities, there are behaviors you can do and engender in the room that will neutralize, not just neutralize these three kinds of people, but bring them in and make them partners, because they should be partners. We're not trying to box people out. We're trying to bring them in, but also set you up, the public speaker, for success. Let's talk about what you do before the room. Before you get in there and the heat is on and everybody's staring at you and you're nervous and freaking out, what can you do when you're just you in your room? First of all, this is Aristotle. Probably heard of Aristotle, smart person. The reason I bring up Aristotle is because Aristotle literally wrote the book on persuasion. It's called On Rhetoric. And every other book ever written on persuasion and rhetoric is basically based on rhetoric. It's a derivation or an explanation or an expansion of Aristotle. He just had everything figured out. Okay, Aristotle said there are three main elements of persuasion. Rhetoric and persuasion are the same thing. It's the same word. And what you're trying to do when you go into a public speaking event is persuade your audience. You're trying to persuade them you are smart. You're trying to persuade them you have something of value, persuade them to listen to you. If you have actions you want them to take, persuade them to take those actions. You're in the persuasion business. Even when you're just giving informational presentations, you're in the persuasion business because you got to persuade them to listen to you and pay attention. Okay, so the elements of persuasion, as Aristotle gave them, and he said there are only three really. There are some other sub ones that aren't important for this, but the main three are ethos, which translated means credibility. You can see the word ethics in there. Someone who is credible, trustworthy. Pathos, which is emotion. That's the second tool you have as a persuader. And you see there empathy, pathetic, sympathy, those words. And then logos, which is obviously logic, facts and figures. Aristotle said those are the only three tools you have, the main tools you have. He called them artistic proofs, just to prove that I have a master's degree. There are inartistic proofs and there are artistic proofs. Bottom line, these are the tools you have when it comes to persuasion. But the good news is this is the only tools anybody has. We're all using the same three tools: credibility, emotion, and logic. Okay, so you're before the room, you're in the room. How do you build credibility? How can you use that tool before you get into the room? One is you can make yourself credible. You can research your audience. Who are they? Where are they? What are their favorite football teams? What is their level of competence with my topic? Do they know a lot? Do they know a little? Or how far along are they? Really do a lot of pre-work so you can walk in fully armed with credibility. You know these people. You know what their deal is. You know what their competence level is, and you can really gauge your presentation right at them. That will build really good credibility. And I'm going to give you some other tips as we go. But research your topic, what you are there to talk about. If you've taken my other public speaking sessions, you've heard me talk about that competence builds confidence. Confidence equals competence. The more competent you are on your topic, the more confident you will be presenting your topic. The more confident you will be, the more your credibility goes up. So get really, really good at your topic. You should. It makes my skin crawl when people stand up and go, "I'm just going to wing it. Now I'm just winging it out here." No, Professor Elliott does not want to hear that out of any of you. We never wing it. If it looks like someone like me is winging it, trust me, they're not. It's just because we're so well prepared, we can relax and present with credibility. So credibility is different than winging it. Winging it is for amateurs. We are not amateurs. We prepare. Okay. The third thing is articulate your credentials to yourself. Remember, this is before the room. You're alone. Write down your credentials. Make a bullet list. I know you've been taught not to brag, and your mother said don't draw attention to yourself. Well, sorry. In this instance, that's the point. You need to walk in and go, everybody, here's why I'm smart about this. Here are my credentials. And so we aren't used to, when we're with our peers a lot of times, we aren't used to saying our credentials. Honestly, I'm not even sure the rest of the staff at the leadership team at the safety center know I had a degree in philosophy and theology until like right now. We just don't, it doesn't come up that much, right? But in this instance, you do. You need to articulate them and make sure you have them. So the entire goal of this phase, when you're this by yourself while you're prepping, is to establish credibility and convince yourself of it. You are credible there, and you have all the credentials you need to talk about this topic. Okay, I showed you a few slides early on as an example of doing exactly this. Here's my thing. Here's my little bullet points. Here are my education. Here's my experience. And I talk a lot around the country. I was in Denver last week. I will be in Orlando this coming week. I will be in, okay. You get it. You go in and you say, here's why you should listen to me on this topic, and be very explicit about it. So there it was, me practicing this stuff. The power of credibility goes like this. The reason you want to establish credibility and why it's a a tool of persuasion, and the one you need to establish first before the other two, because it goes like this. If I were to teach a painting class, Kevin Elliott, teach a painting class, you might attend, but if Bob Ross taught that painting class, yeah, you'd really attend at that point, right? What if Michael Jordan were teaching a basketball clinic? What if Stephen Hawking was going to teach you algebra? What if Beyonce wanted to teach you stage performance? Right? You get it. These people are top of their field in their field. Oh, and there's a reason why I mentioned Aristotle. Because Aristotle, in the world of persuasion, there is no one more credible. He wrote the book on persuasion. That's what you're trying to do with credibility, is to establish yourself as an expert of what you're talking about. And that will help you with those three types of people who might want to horn in on your presentation because they might think they know more than you. Well, you need to kind of put the signal out. I know a lot. Competence equals confidence. Remember, remind yourself of the stuff you know. Really prepare a lot. And that competence on your topic will automatically build your confidence, which builds trust with your audience. They will automatically trust you more, which means you're already doing jujitsu. You're already putting that room in position to succeed and to trust you. And those three people types, the sniper, the filibuster, and the oh my gosh, my third one is they will trust you more. It will then minimize their sort of chances of jumping in and trying to one-up you or upstage you before the room. Pathos, emotion. This is the second tool you have in your bag. Now, you might think to yourself, oh, I'm in the technical fields and I don't really need to, I'm an engineer, I'm a planner, I'm a whatever. And I understand that. That makes a lot of sense. So you will lean more toward the logos. You will lean more toward logic and facts and figures. Don't get me wrong, that is absolutely important. But humans are humans, and I don't mean you have to be like bestie friends with them, and we don't have to get mushy, and we don't have to be like a Hallmark movie or anything like that. But using emotion to bond yourself to your audience is incredibly powerful. It's one of the three tools of persuasion. So here's how you do it. You can find common ground with your audience. We like to listen to people, and we attribute expertise to people we feel good about. So what you do is you just research a little bit before you go to in your research phase. What's their weather like out there? What are their favorite sports teams? Have any big local news things happened? I have a friend who, before she gets on the call with a new client or with a sales prospect, she always goes to their Instagram and then she goes to like the weather.com or Weather Channel, and she researches the weather in that town. And I've seen her do this. She gets on the call and she'll say, oh man, you guys just had some nasty rainstorms. Everybody okay? You guys good? And think about that. If some stranger has researched and knows enough about you, cares enough about you to have researched that, think about that. How good that makes you feel. So the entire point of that is to engender goodwill. You want your audience, we all like to be seen. We all like to be appreciated. And if you do that, if you can walk in the room and make a couple of very simple references, it engenders goodwill and it builds rapport with your audience. If you've ever had a friend or maybe a romantic attachment or a colleague even, where we'll say things like, oh, we just clicked. We just immediately got along. We understood, we were completing each other's sentences. You're describing rapport. You're describing, and you can manufacture that with an audience. It's not a mistake. You can do it on purpose. The whole goal of using emotion in your presentation is to bond with your audience. If you couple that with credibility, with ethos and pathos, now they trust you because you have said these things, but they also feel good about you. They like you. And what you're doing is you are now dismantling the ability for those three people, the catalyst, the filibuster, the sniper, to jump in and do what they do because they like you and you're clearly established as an expert. Let me show you the power of pathos, the power of a little bit of emotion, just a little bit. Now, this this guy screaming at his phone. We've all had this experience when you call customer service, right? Have you ever had this, right? Where you get on with the automated thing? I'm not sure it is even possible to talk to a human being anymore, but back in the old days, 2 years ago, when you could find a human being, how many of you screamed at your phone, representative, representative, I don't want to talk to another automated, get me onto a human being, and you're screaming and you're screaming. Or you finally get on with the human being and it's about a lost package or it's about whatever. How likely are you to lose your temper with that person? The stranger on the other end of the line who you don't know. If you're like me, and maybe this is just true confession time, I have a pretty high likelihood of losing my temper because I'm already mad. Like I don't even want to be on this call. And then they're running me through the little script they've been getting. Like it drives me out of my mind and I lose my temper. Now, let me ask you this. What if one of your grandparents were on the other end? My wife and I call this IT for old people, but she has to go. Her dad is 84 years old and he lives 3 minutes from us. And at least once a week, she has to go to his house and log him back into all the accounts he has logged out of accidentally. She has to log him back into ESPN so he can watch baseball. She has to log him back into Netflix. We call it IT for old people. Now, it's frustrating. Let's be honest, right? It's like it's easily once a week, and we're like, how do you accidentally do this? But we don't say that. We don't get mad. It's her dad, right? He's 84 years old. We love him. We feel good about him, and so we're more patient with people we feel good about. That's the power. That's what you're trying to do, is build a bond. We're not trying to fall in love with each other. We're just trying to feel good about each other. And then they will give you the benefit of the doubt in lots and lots of ways if you just go out of your way a little bit to give them some emotional bond. Okay, logic. The facts, the figures, the charts, the graphs, the trend lines. You need to have full command of that stuff. Know your stuff. Make sure you're using credible sources, all the things they taught you in college. But this is when it's time to really dig in and make sure you know the guts, the facts of your presentation. And again, this is before the room. Now, I'm going to maybe introduce, you might know about this, a technique called rebuttal and backing. It's arguing with yourself. I'm going to explain this in detail in just a little bit. The incredible power of arguing with yourself before you get into the room, and show you how to use that logical process to neutralize the folks in the room who might derail you. Okay, the goal here is to anticipate and answer rebuttals. Let me explain. Say you're in a courtroom and you are defending yourself or someone else, and you give your case. You give all the data, you give all the facts, you give all the pictures, exhibit A, exhibit B, I object, all those things, just like in Law and Order. And you give your case and you say, Your Honor, I rest my case. Now, does the judge go, or the jury go right to the verdict? No. The other side gets to have a say. The other side, whether it's the defense or the prosecutor, however that works, they get to rebut your arguments. You made your argument, you had your time, but they get to go, yeah, but what about this? What about this? What about this? Kind of like a sniper, right? Maybe a little bit like a filibuster. They want to get up and they just want to talk and they want to share and they want to say all the things you probably didn't think of. Okay, rebuttal, they call that rebuttal. The other side of that is once they make a rebuttal, then you get a chance to rebut the rebuttal. And they call that, or we call that, backing. Rebuttal and backing. This came from a philosopher of language and law and persuasion named Stephen Toulmin. And he defined a process that I don't have time to really go through, but it's super powerful. A process for building a really solid, or at least an argument with a very high chance of winning. But I pulled out these two pieces of his process: rebuttal and backing. And remember, we are still in the room alone preparing. You're not in the room yet. You're before the room. You're preparing. So if you can think of as many rebuttals as you possibly can, ask your friends, find your most argumentative friend, do your presentation and let them tear you up and go, yeah, what about this? What about that? Oh, I heard over here on the news the other day about that. I read this on Google once. What about that? I saw this on Facebook. Is that true? Let them do all that rebuttaling. And then you go and find backing, find answers for every single rebuttal. If you can't find an answer, one of two things is true. You need to do more homework and find the answer, or you have a hole in your presentation that you need to fill. Maybe you need to reconsider something. Maybe they really do have a legitimate rebuttal. But what you're doing is you're making your presentation airtight. You're locking it down. You're thinking of everything they're going to think of before they are in the room to think of it. This is incredibly powerful. I'm about to show you how. So ethos, pathos, logos. Those are the three tools you have: credibility, emotion, logic. Okay, now we're in the room, y'all. You've done all the prep. You're ready to go. Let's get in there with these people. In the room, here are some tips that I'm going to give you for how you physically manage that room to work with these three personality types. Bring them onto your side and have a very successful public speaking event. One is, I'm going to show you how to arrange your room, some techniques for building rapport and authority, which we've just talked about, pathos and ethos. Set ground rules. Use reciprocity, the reciprocity principle. Cool little technique. Use your eyes, and then rebut and back. I'm going to show you how to do that in the room, because remember, before the room, you're over there doing it by yourself. I'm going to show you how to deploy rebuttal and backing in a room to neutralize these folks. First is, how do you arrange the room? If you've been in a public speaking thing with me before, you know this is how I say to arrange a room. There's you, the speaker. There's your visual aid. It's going to be a flip chart or a PowerPoint or a screen or whatever. There's them. There's your audience. And you want to build this little triangle. What the triangle lets you do is keep eye contact with your audience. It lets you keep your body open to your audience, like these old grainy pictures of me in my generic blue shirts. But it also puts you in front of the room in a leadership position. It tells the room, I'm the one in charge of this space. And here's my visual aid. I want to be helpful, but that's how you position yourself. My back is not turned to them. My body is wide open. My body language is confident. Like, I'm here to deliver to you. And that's how you arrange your room. Boop. There's me, one more gray shirt. So arrange your room just like that. And you're already starting to establish your authority in the room. If there is a lectern, or what some people call a podium, is a little stand, you don't need it. Move it out of the way. Reference my previous public speaking thing. You don't need notes. You don't need all that stuff. And again, that's establishing your credibility in the room as an expert. Building with rapport. You want to bond with your audience. So introduce common ground. All that homework you did about sports, about the weather, about any festival they have in town going on. That's the beautiful thing about the internet and social media. You can find out, people spill their guts all the time. You can find out what's going on in their space and in that, something that is relevant to them. Bring up something in the room. If some weird thing happened earlier in the day, you're bonding with them. You're showing them we are a team. Or you can tell a story. People love stories. Jamie, I just thought about this. We should probably do a whole thing on storytelling if we haven't. How to do storytelling for your marketing and outreach. But tell a story, tell a good story. We love them. We love story times. This is how childcare and adults are exactly the same. We just love a good story. Share something personal. I like to share that I raise chickens. I usually open presentations with that. One is because if there are any chicken people in the room, I'd like to meet them and talk with them. We're weird, but at least we understand each other. The other one is just this. I want to bond with my audience. I want to share something a little personal about me. Another one is you can play the Rube. And this Purdue looks like Hogwarts. I spoke at Purdue. I've been up there a few times to speak at, there's a great conference called Road School. And they've invited me up there to talk. And so I'm from Florida. If you know Florida, you know we're just made out of sand and limestone and chalk. There's not, Purdue, their big student union there is made out of stones, these big, beautiful, like Midwestern limestone. It's gorgeous. And it looks like Hogwarts to me. And every time they have like stone floors. It's still crazy to me to see buildings made out of rocks, because that doesn't happen in Florida. We build them out of oyster shells and things like that. So I walk in every time I'm at Purdue and I'm like, thank you for inviting me back to the main hall at Hogwarts. Like, I love this place. And they chuckle and they laugh, but it's me just being this Ruby Floridian who's not used to seeing rocks. Whatever, pick something like that, because what it does is it humanizes you and it bonds you to your audience. I'm an expert in this, but I'm not an expert in building or making buildings out of rocks. That's a way to build rapport. Now, here's some ways to build authority, just like my little slides here. Remember, you're establishing credibility. You state your credentials. That's why I stated mine right up front here, and you customize your credentials for that room to make sure you are maximizing your ethos, your credibility in that room. List your relevant experience. I talk a lot. I was in Denver last week, right? You get it. I lay all that on to signal to you, I know what I'm talking about on this topic. I don't know things about other things, but I know about this. Please trust me on this. Be nice to people. Don't be a jerk. No, look, even if you're an expert, nobody likes a condescending expert. That's gross. Don't be gross. Be nice to people. You can be, matter of fact, if you notice, the people who are usually best in their field are more humble about it, because they just know they're very good at what they do. But you want to be nice to people. It builds your credibility. And then when you're stating this stuff, it always helps to state something personal, like chickens, because again, you're going from ethos into pathos, right? You're a complete human being. You are establishing credibility, but you're not a dictator. You are a person, but you are an expert. Next, set some ground rules in your room. You have every right to establish ground rules in your room. And if you do, it establishes credibility. It shows, oh, this person, oh, okay, all right, they're in charge. It positions you as the leader. So what you do is you can say, listen, I'm going to save questions and feedback to the end of the presentation. And that tells everybody, yeah, just filibusters, I'm going to need you to hold off. Snipers, maybe at the end, right? You're already neutralizing them. Now, I don't do that. I like to take questions along the way if possible. I know it's not possible in this format, but I normally do. But you can take questions along the way. I do, because it's my style, but also because it establishes credibility. I'm not afraid to take questions. Ask whatever you want right in the middle of it. It's fine with me. But that's just me. That's my thing. You can do that. But either way, when you do that, it establishes your authority in the room, see? Because you're setting the rules. And it just depends on your competence, what you're comfortable with. Next, to build authority and to bring your audience on side, is to use the reciprocity principle. And if you've ever heard of the reciprocity principle, you know it goes like this. When you give to a charity, like my wife and I, we give to St. Jude. It's one of our favorite charities. Now, we give our money to St. Jude. We don't expect anything back. Like, we just do it. But they always send us those little labels for, with your name on them, for the envelopes throughout the year. It's just a nice little gift. Or you've seen groups like in an airport maybe or something that give out flowers, or they give out little gifts. They're trying to use the reciprocity principle. The reciprocity principle says, if I give you a small gift, you feel obliged to give me back a bigger gift. Isn't that weird? It's an empathy. It's a human empathy thing we've evolved with each other. It's why if you go to Costco or Sam's, if you live in the South, they give you little samples. You think it's to see what it tastes like, and it is, but really what it is like, oh, they gave me a little gift. They gave me a sausage ball. How nice. I should probably buy a thing of the sausage balls. Those nice people. It's just built, it's hardwired into us. And so if you can give your audience a little bit, this comes with more competence and confidence. If I go into a room and I can spot the sniper or the filibuster or the catalyst, I've gotten to where I can sort of pick them up. You can actually give them a little bit of what they want, and it siphons off some of what they might have built up. Because if you give them a little of what they want, they are more likely to give you more of what you want, which is attention to you. Again, that's jujitsu, and I'm not saying you need to do that as a beginner. You are perfectly fine holding off comments to the end, but if you do, you can fold that in as you get better and better. And now I'm doing reciprocity throughout my presentation to say, hey, you know what? Great question. I'll tell you what, let me answer that. And you can manage your room and slowly manage those people, but it lets them have what they want. So now they're friends, right? You're friends. You're bringing them on side. Rebuttal and backing. Okay. This is how you open a rebuttal and backing thing. You say, you know what? You all might be thinking this. You all might be thinking that a sniper is going to show up and destroy your presentation. Okay, that's how you say to your audience, I have thought of what you might be thinking about. This is especially good for snipers and filibusters. Because you go, you know, you might be thinking this. And you say, remember, this is your rebuttal and backing session. You say, you might be thinking this, but you know what? I looked into that and here's the answer. And then, you know, you might be thinking this. You might have thought to yourself, just sitting in the session right now, that this, you know, that Aristotle wasn't real or whatever it was. And I can say, oh yeah, or here's my answer to that rebuttal. See what you're doing? You're dismantling the arguments that a sniper might bring up before the sniper can say them. You're taking arrows out of their quiver. If you've done this thoroughly enough, they won't have anything left. There's nothing for them to snipe. There's no way for them to jump in because you've answered everything proactively, preemptively. If they know, and it compounds, it builds your credibility. So now if the room is looking at you and go, whoa, they really know what they're talking about. Okay, maybe I'll hold off on this filibuster. If they're a catalyst, like, oh, that person really is the leader in the room. You know what? let me just keep it on the down low this time. You can neutralize and manage your room just by really prepping well. So these are your 3 audience member types. Let me give you some specifics for each one, what they need, and here's what you can do in the room for each one of these specifically. So the catalyst, remember what they do is they lead the room. What they need is attention. So here's some things you can do. You can include them. You can, if you learn their name, I recommend you learn their name. You include them a little at a time throughout your presentation. Reference their name. Remember, they need attention. They don't even need to talk. They mostly just need to be seen and recognized in like the attention. So mention their name a few times. Ask them to help you set up the room. If you get there early enough and you identify them, they'll identify themselves pretty quickly. Say, hey, do you mind helping me move this thing? You're putting them in a command position, so now they feel more like a leader. Ask them to help you with sound check. Hey, can you hear me back there? Are you guys good? Hey, Bill, does this sound good to you? Do you think everybody's gonna be, let them be a leader in the room. And then you can start a running joke with them. If you have a sports reference or something you researched and you can, in other words, what you're doing is slowly including them and letting them have a little leadership position, though they're like a co-pilot at that point. That's what you're trying to do. So there's some specifics you can do. Your filibuster, what do they need? Or what do they do? They monopolize your time. What do they need? They need to be recognized. So here's what you do. You give them one speech. If they raise their hand, and then they will show themselves to be a filibuster, you can get out of that, let them do their thing. You pull them out of that, and then that's the one they get. When they raise their hand again, or excuse me, before you praise them, you say, okay, that was great. Oh man, wow, everybody, appreciate, that was super insightful. And just praise them. So now, remember, you're giving them recognition. Tie back to what they said, if possible. So yeah, hey, you remember when Sally said that thing earlier? Oh my gosh, that's totally relevant to this thing right here. If they raise their hand again and they're like, hey, I have another one. You say, oh, you know what? Hold on to that one for just a second. Let me get through these next few slides. Oh, just hold on a second. And use your body language and your eyes to control access. So you don't have to, don't make eye contact with them, right? Just kind of scan over them, and it will kind of signal to them that they had their chance. Sniper. What do? They counter argue. What do they need? Validation. So let them make their counter argument, unless you've anticipated all their arguments. If you do good rebuttal and backing, you will anticipate everything. And they won't have anything to say, and they will sit there in the back with their arms folded, just like this guy. I've seen it happen, I promise. If you do these things, you can be a mental and verbal jujitsu expert. You can control that room. You can be successful. You will be the expert in that room. A few Mythbusters and then a few minutes of questions. Mythbusters about this whole thing. First, these people aren't even that common. Honestly, they aren't. I know you're afraid of it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying these people don't exist. They totally exist, but it's not something you run up against a whole lot. And the more you prepare and the better you are at getting ready for the room, honestly, they don't come up that much. The second thing is your audience is on your side. The audience wants to see you succeed. The audience are human, and we don't like to watch people fail right in front of us. It makes us all feel awkward. So I know you think they're waiting to pounce on you, but they really aren't. They really aren't. They're already impressed that you're doing this anyway. Always remember that, because they're scared too. Here's some recommended reading, and then I'll stop and we'll take any questions. 3 books I love and I recommend to everyone when you're trying to study these things. And I got a lot of this stuff from these sources in addition to On Rhetoric by Aristotle, all-time bestseller. Talk Like TED, Carmine Gallo, he studied TED Talks and he looked for common factors with the most successful TED Talks and pulled them out and said, hey, do these things and you can be successful. I pulled from that book for this presentation. Good in a Room by Stephanie Palmer, probably my favorite business book of all, second favorite after Positioning, but that's a different topic. Good in a Room is probably the best communication book I've read on topics like this. And then Stories That Stick by Kendra Hall. It's like a manual for how to build a good story. I love those books. I recommend them to everyone. And there, I'm going to stop and see if anybody has any questions or if there's anything in the chat pod at all.
We do. We have quite a few, so we're going to try and get through as many as we can in the next couple minutes. There were some questions about the recording. It will be available within a week on our archive website. So hopefully you can all watch that again if you would like to listen back to this. So Kevin, one question for you is, can you share a couple tips on being an audience member who helps the speaker do a better job?
What a good question that is. I love that question. Okay, so here's the thing. You can watch your presenter and you will see the areas where they are strongest and where they are weakest. You'll pick it up, right? If you want to ask a question, remember, if you want to help them build their credibility with the rest of the room, ask them a softball question that is right in their wheelhouse and let them shine. Okay, that will build their confidence. It will also show the room that you the audience member, are there to engage. So the person's not looking at an empty room, but you're asking a question that is relatively easy for them to answer so they can shine. And that will really help the vibe of the room. That's a really good question.
Another question for you is, if you're presenting to a group of folks you know fairly well or regularly present to, do you still need to establish credibility?
Yes, sometimes more, because they know you, right? They know you from other areas of your life. Now, do you need to sit there and give them your degree and stuff like that? Probably not as detailed or as explicit as that, but you might mention it just to remind them. In other words, yes, you always need to establish credibility, but you can do it in different ways. If I don't know you at all, I have to really lay it on thick. If I know the people in the room, or for instance, if you're presenting to colleagues and they know everything you do, you don't have to give them your resume. No. But even like if they're in your company and they don't work with you every day, a little reminder wouldn't hurt. Absolutely. Credibility is a big deal. But yeah, you don't tell them things they already obviously know. That's a good distinction to make, by the way.
Another great question in here is that if you recognize yourself in one or more of the personalities that you talked about, how can you retrain yourselves to not be disruptive?
What a good self-aware question that is. I'm not going to ask you which one of those 3 you are, but I hope that just seeing this presentation and seeing yourself there and seeing the behaviors, those people, and that I've just tried to teach you all how to counteract and work with, that knowing that will help you alter your behavior. So if you are a naturally talkative person who wants to jump in and help, again, these are not bad people. They really do want to help. Try to be very conscious to limit the amount of time you talk and try to focus on the times that only help your presenter. If you are a natural born sniper, save it. Just save it. Talk to them afterwards. You don't need to do that in front of everybody. If you are a filibuster because you just want to help a lot, then help, but just be conscious and try to keep it a little less verbose. If you are a catalyst and a leader in the room and you know who you are, lead that room to pay attention to the speaker. Really lean in, use your body language, ask pertinent, kind questions, and the room will follow your lead.
The next one is that this questioner was really hoping there would be some discussion about taking questions after panels. She said she guesses it was kind of covered in the rebuttal and backing section, but do you have anything specific to say about that fear?
That's it. That's the answer. So rebuttal and backing works whether you're answering questions in the moment along the way, or like we're doing now after the fact. Remember, this is a preparation thing. So if you present enough and you prepare enough, they're going to ask you questions you know the answers to, or they're going to ask you questions that are so close to something you can improvise an answer. If they ask you something you just don't know, so I tell you what, that is a great question, and I don't have time to totally answer that one right now, but I tell you what, let's follow up after we get done. Can you find me after the meeting? And they will. And you diffuse it, right? You redirect it so you're not sitting there fumbling around. But if you do your homework, it doesn't happen that often, honestly, that somebody asks a question you haven't thought of. Because remember, you have more experience with this content than they do. They're coming to it fresh. You've had lots of experience with it.
Someone was asking about whether or not this presentation will be shared. There is a download of the slides available under the handouts pod if you're interested in that. Otherwise, the recording will be available within a week on our website. And then another question for you, Kevin, is any pointers on if you go completely blank when presenting?
I do, and I know we're about to run out of time. In my previous presentation, I give these bullets so that that was recorded on the previous session. If you have to drop off, there are 3 things you do if you just blank completely out in the room. You want to stop, just go, okay. Say, give me just a moment, please. Say those words, just a moment, please. Take a deep breath because you need oxygen to your brain. Your brain is freaking out right now. You need oxygen to go to your prefrontal cortex so you can start thinking so the oxygen helps you think of words. So pausing, taking a deep breath, and if you have a visual aid up there, look at your visual aid and it will remind you what you were talking about. And I promise the words will come back. I think earlier in this presentation, I forgot one of my 3 audiences, right? I just blanked on it, but it came back. So that will happen. If you take a deep breath, give yourself a minute, the words will turn back on and you'll be back on track. I promise. I've seen it happen so many times.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one last question and we'll call it an end right after that one. Thank you all for joining us today. Our very last question is, do you have any tips for handling meetings with members of the public when it's a public meeting on a hot button topic or a controversial project?
I do. I can't give a lot of them right now because we're out of time, but I'm telling you, this rebuttal and backing thing, it works, it works, it works. You know what they're going to come and say to you. You know what their objections are going to be. And the key with rebuttal and backing is to preempt it, is to say, you all might be thinking that roundabout is not going to, it's going to impair traffic, that roundabout. I'll tell you what, but we asked that same question, but you know what, we've done studies on this and others, and you can anticipate what they're going to say and answer it before they say it. If you do that enough and you do it thoroughly enough, the questions you get, there aren't many questions left, right? Because you've answered them all. And then they're going to be redundant. And now that's the jujitsu. You're putting them in a spot to be redundant. Everybody's like, well, they already answered that question. They already mentioned that. How many times have you been in the meeting, right? He goes, well, they already said that earlier in the presentation. Weren't you listening? See, it's jujitsu. So the rebuttal and backing, I'm telling you, is a very big deal.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and close. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I apologize that we weren't able to get through all the questions. There were a ton of really great questions in there. Again, the recording will be available within the week on our website under our webinar archive. We will see you again next month. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, everybody.